in the interest of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started. I know some folks are still coming in, but not to worry, we'll have just some time for introductions first. So first of all, welcome back to the Healthiest Cities and Counties meeting. I mean, it's been probably at least a month since we've last met, so I appreciate your patience as we have gotten this next meeting scheduled and on the calendar. We have some exciting updates to share with you, and look forward to being able to move the work forward on this grant. So a few housekeeping things before we get started. Please mute your audio for now. If you are in a space where you have more than one audio, you're on your phone and on your laptop or computer, then please make sure to just have one of your audio technologies available. Don't have both, otherwise it will create an echo. If you are using the call-in number, and I know some of our folks from Fort Bragg can't always necessarily access GoToMeeting, so if you're using the call-in number, you can use the chat box, which you won't be able to see the screen. So we're going to try to make sure that we're verbalizing what we're saying as well. And then you can also, there is a function to raise your hand. So if you need to do that, you can do that, or I believe you can type in the chat box as well. So we'll be able, there's a couple of different ways to engage. We're going to record the presentation this time. And I know we've tried to do that in the past for a couple of meetings, but haven't been able to actually get the recording to work. So we are hoping it will work this time, and we will share it out after the presentation, and we'll share some more details about how we're going to share out minutes and agenda items in just a few minutes. So here's our agenda for today. You're going to meet Gwen if you haven't already in just a few minutes, but we're going to make some introductions today. Today, we're also going to do a little bit of a review of our website and that we've put up so far, and we want to get your input and feedback about that and what you'd like to see on the website. You're going to hear from Gwen, who was our new community liaison, about some North Carolina strategies around food and farm councils and food system assessments, and some work she's been doing in the background over the last month or so. And then you're going to get an update from Dr. Jared McGirt, who is with UNC Lineberger, about the food system assessment. And then we're going to get into the work and talk about the Food Policy Council and how we're going to form that group. And we're going to put you guys to work in thinking about who's going to help us to do that and what the timeline is and when we need to do things to make sure that we are staying on track. So that's our agenda for today. And we will gonna start with some introductions. So I'll start with myself. I am Jennifer Green. I'm the director of Cumberland County Health Department. And in the interim, I'm sort of serving as the project liaison manager of the project. You're gonna get a different, better person than me soon. And Gwen's gonna help. You're gonna meet Gwen in just a moment. And she's really going to be helping us lead this project forward. And we're going to ask you guys to do a little work with us. I'm going to ask you to share your name, what organization or neighborhood you're from, and then something that I dream about every night. What is your first post-pandemic activity going to be? Like, what are you going to do when this is all over? I'm sure you have a list in your head, but just one thing that you're going to do when this is all over, and something that you're excited about. And we'll just take a few minutes to do that. So keep your answers brief, if you will. And so I'll start there. I'll start, and then I'm going to hand the mic to Gwen, and I'll introduce Gwen and then let her talk just a moment. So my first post-pandemic activity is going to be, my cousins live in Baltimore, and there's a spa that we got to go to one time. And so my first post-pandemic activity is going to be to get a massage, because, and like I can feel the tension in my neck and back. So that is going to be my first post-pandemic activity after I see my family. So Gwen is our new community liaison. If you'll remember back a month ago, we had the opportunity with this grant funding to hire a community liaison to work with this project. And we have brought on Gwen. She's been here maybe 2 weeks. She's working for the project, not quite full time, and right now just in a small capacity, but will increase her hours on the project coming up in December. And so I'll let Gwen introduce herself. You'll hear more from her in coming days and less from me. But I'll let Gwen introduce herself, and then I'll call out you guys one by one based on who I can see on my screen. So Gwen, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Gwendolyn McNeil, and I'm the community liaison, like Dr. Green said. So I'll pretty much be working in between the different groups, so between the Fayetteville community, the Fort Bragg community, and then also here at the health department. So I'm working part-time right now. I'm also an intern, so I'm getting ready to graduate in the next couple of weeks. So once I graduate, I'll be able to move up to the full 25 hours. So yeah, so my first post-pandemic activity would probably be to, I went to go to Japan previous to the pandemic starting as a graduation gift. So that's probably what I'll be doing.
Thank you. And there's so many of you guys on here, which is wonderful. So what we're going to do, actually, in the interest of time, because I really want to hear about what your post-pandemic activities so I can get an idea, is if you will type in the chat box your name, your organization, and your first post-pandemic activity, if you'd like to share that. Let's do it that way so we can make sure we move through our meeting and get out on time. So your name, your organization, and your first post-pandemic activity, put those in the chat box, if you will, so we know who you are and who is on the call. While you guys are doing that, please do a couple of things for me. Gwen is going to be taking some minutes for us in the background, and we will share those out after the meeting is over. Thank you all for dropping things in. Trip home back to California, I love it, and I'd love to go see a movie again. I know it feels like, and a long nap, Ashley. I am with you. I'm taking, I like massages because really not for the massage, but because I get to take a nap. So that is, I love seeing this travel, family time, hug your family. Yes, your post home trip to Bermuda, all these things. Yes, this is awesome. I wish we had more time to talk about this. I love all of these suggestions and things that you guys are going to do, and hope we get to do them very, very soon. Go to the beach. Yes, hug your family and friends. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to get started on our agenda. Please keep typing those things into the chat box. As a reminder, from where we've come, there are two big aims to this project from the Healthiest Cities and Counties grant. The first is to advance health equity. The second is to improve access to foods that support healthy eating patterns. So there's a couple of very specific things that we're working towards in Cumberland County. One is to establish a joint Cumberland County Fort Bragg Food Policy Council. So we really want this work to be sustainable. And we know that this grant funding is a 2-year grant. It's going to end at some point, but we want the work to continue on after the grant. So we want to establish a food policy council that will really be able to keep the work going, and then also think about what policy systems and environmental change we're going to do after the grant is over. The second part is to complete a food system assessment that includes policy recommendations that our food policy council can then take forth and say, yes, these are the things that we want policies around food systems that we want to change, or environmental changes that we want to make in our county. And then, but in the second year of the project, we want to work on implementing those things, implementing the recommendations based on the food systems assessment and then the food policy council, and working to make some sustainable change in Cumberland County. So we're going to start with, and for those folks that are new to the project, we will feel free to stop and ask questions, but we're going to start with a quick website review. So last time you guys told us a little bit about what you'd like to see on the website. So we want to pull it up. And many thanks to Kristen Button from our county's PIO office who helped to work on the website. It is a work in progress and it's not finished yet. But we want to show you an initial look at it and then ask you about what you'd like to see on the website. And I see so many new faces to the project, so this is exciting in the chat box. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment so I pull it up. Okay, can you guys see the website? I think you guys can, from what I can see. So this, I'm going to pause and let Gwen facilitate this part of our discussion.
Okay, so we pretty much just wanted to get an idea of what you all would like. If you guys would like to have more information as far as like community resources that are available here in Fayetteville, or so if anybody.
And us as well, once we have those available.
From the community members, and I wonder if I lost in the email.
Jared, like a link to a Google Doc where people can, or a Google Drive that people can upload or
yeah.
Google. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. And I heard, thanks Patricia in the chat box, link to community resources. So if you guys have community resources that you want to put on the website, go ahead and drop those in the chat box and we can start generating a list of things of resources you'd like to see on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you all are thinking about? I heard data, the Google Drive. The link to the community resources. Okay, keep typing if you'd like to. I'm going to pull back up our PowerPoint. Okay, the next piece on our agenda is to hear from Gwen about a conversation she has had with North Carolina Community Food Strategies. And that will sort of set the context and the tone for our next two agenda items after that, to hear an update from Jared about the food system assessment and then to talk about the Food Policy Council work that's coming. So Gwen, can you kind of set the stage for us and tell us about your conversations with the North Carolina Community Food Strategies group?
Yeah, so on Monday, me and Ashley had met with Lindsay Carver and Abby Piner, and we pretty much, they told us about the community food strategies. Prior to the meeting, me and Ashley were looking at how we could go about starting the Food Policy Council and what that would look like, or what our structure would look like for it. And when we went to Google, community food strategies was the first thing that came up. So we checked through their website, and they're pretty much a multi-organizational group. They're made up of different organizations that come together and discuss their food policy councils and the pretty much the food systems here in North Carolina. They discuss how they can improve in their communities, as well as take tips and tricks from other food councils in North Carolina. So we both found the conversation to be very informative, and they provided us with a great amount of resources to use. So pretty much we explained what we would like the Food Policy Council to look like here in Fayetteville, joining pretty much the Fayetteville community with the Fort Bragg community, what that would look like. And we talked about how we would probably want something that's formal, that's a formal structure where people from Fayetteville and people from Fort Bragg could be appointed on a board for the Food Policy Council, and they would be pretty much controlling the Food Policy Council here. And then we also went over how the, pretty much what the grant was. We explained the grant to them. And we also went over how we would want 2 different subcommittees. So of course the Food Policy Council, as well as the Food Environment Assessment Group. And they also provided us with McDowell County, which they said would probably be the closest county to they would have similar structure to how we would want our Food Policy Council to look like. So coming up in the next couple of days, I will be contacting McDowell County to get their thoughts. So for the next for the next community group meeting, I'll be able to provide more information on what our structure as a Food Policy Council could look like. And then we also have a captain from Fort Bragg who is interested in leading the Food Policy Council. So that's exciting. And we're looking forward to see what we can do, how she can help us. So yeah, I'm looking through notes as I'm talking. So I just don't want to miss any information from the meeting. I think that pretty much covers it. We also talked about how we have both rural and city municipalities, and how that can kind of pose as it could be a barrier, but we don't want it to be a barrier. We want to make sure we're catering to every aspect of Cumberland County and meet the needs of the community. And I feel like with the food environment assessment, that would definitely help us when it comes to what rules and policies we want to implement with the council. That's pretty much my update as far as the meeting I had with the community food strategies group. Did anybody have any questions or comments?
So Ashley, thank you. Dropped in the chat box the link to the food strategies group. And one thing that will be really helpful for us going forward is to learn from what others around the state and around the country have done. So that is a good tool if you're not familiar with food policy councils to see what the setup can look like. And I want to shout out to Lindsay Carver, who is from that group, who's on the line today. So thanks for being a part of our meeting as we try to kind of start navigating this. So we're going to have some certainly lessons learned from our peer counties across the state. And there's several other grantees that are also working on food policy councils that also receive this funding in other states. So we'll be able to learn from them and use that website as a resource. So I'll shoot drop it in the chat box if that's something you're interested in learning more or interested in learning about the food policy or serving on the food policy subcommittee to take a look at.
All right, and I'm going to hand it off to Jared to talk about the food system assessment.
All right, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Jared McWhird. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Nutrition at UNC Greensboro. I've actually worked with community food strategies in the past. I used to be the leader of the Chatham County Food Policy Council, and I've worked with Abby in the past. So that's a really great group, a lot of great resources. They've been doing this work for a while now. So definitely great that we're able to connect with them. So one of our first strategies as part of this effort is to understand what the food environment looks like in Cumberland County. And so we want to try and create a map, kind of a master map, or a map where we can put every bit of information that we think is important into this map, and that it can really be our go-to. We can also create some other maps that are more focused on particular issues as well. we're really just trying to gather as much information as we can so that we can get just a high level view of what's happening in the county and how that might be influencing people's behaviors. And so the two things that we're kind of focused on at this point is looking at availability. So whether or not something is present in the county or in particular communities within the county. And then accessibility. So how easy is it to get to those resources? And so we're focused on food resources. We really want to think broadly about that. So retail, local food systems, so things like farmers markets, CSAs, that sort of thing, produce stands, and then other types of programs like food banks, food pantries, that sort of thing. So we want to think really broad about food resources and about availability and accessibility. And so what we're planning to do is to utilize GIS technology to map the food environment using existing and derived data. So there's a lot of data that we can get access to, that's secondary data that other people have collected. So there's business databases, there's US Census data, there's USDA, the US Department of Agriculture data. The CDC has some data around the food environment, and there's some other data sets from previous projects that have things like location of fruit and vegetable markets. So we want to utilize this data that's out there, but we also want to really be creative and also really get all of the more contextual data that we can from Cumberland County. And so that's where we want to work with you all, the community. We want to get any kind of data that you think could be useful to map. We would love to get for you to send that to us. And it doesn't have to be that it's there's something super kind of map based. We'll have locations, and that's great, but it's also information about locations, because we can map information along with those points or those like dots on the map. And that's actually really important to us. So if you have anything that you want to share, any resources in the community that are in a certain place or that has some kind of spatial attribute to them, then we would love to get that information. We would love to get information about that particular space and how we can add or layer that information in along with the availability to get more contextualized information. So our goal is to set up a repository or like a Google Drive or like a folder that we can share that people can dump data into or send data into. And so one question I have is, are there any preferences for what type of website or system that we use? I know that some people have issues accessing certain types of programs. Is a Google Drive okay for most people in the community? We just want to make sure that we're making this thing as accessible as possible. Any suggestions or reservations?
And Jared, for people or community members that would not have access to internet, or they could also share that data with Gwen somehow, or if your Google Drive is not accessible to you, then share it with Gwen, and then we could upload it for you. So if you have the community, if for example all the food pantries in Cumberland County by location, and you don't have access to Google Drive, we could have you send it to Gwen, and then we could get it in the right place.
Yes, and I can put my email in the chat so you all can get that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, definitely reach out to anyone on our team if you have this information and you just feel like you're able to upload it into a drive or anything like that. We would be more than happy to do that for you. Okay, and then I think we'll talk about this a bit more later, but I guess we can talk, or I can go ahead and introduce this topic of how you think you might want to be involved in the mapping process or in the data sharing process. So go ahead and start thinking about that, and then you can reach out to us and let us know. And I think we'll have like a subgroup around that. Then the next step after we do the mapping is to do observational scans and field work. And so this is where we start to look more at context within the community. And so what we were hoping to do was train residents to use smartphones to map food access in their communities and collect contextual information using Google My Maps. And so our plan was to set up a training session where we showed people in the community how they could do this. It's actually a lot easier than it sounds. And then have community members be a part of the data collection where they're actually collecting the data that they think is important about their neighborhoods. And so with this, we could look at additional contextual things like affordability, acceptability. So is it something that you actually want, or is it the quality that you want or need it to be? And then accommodation. So like how easy, like how are those food resources set up to make it easy or hard for you to access them? And you may have heard of like a photo voice approach where you go around taking pictures of the community. That's the sort of thing that we can do with this. Like we can have both information as well as pictures that we can then incorporate into the My Maps so that whenever people click on a point, they can find out a lot of really interesting and important information about that particular resource. And so a big question that we have is when we should do this. Obviously the world is a little bit different right now than it was whenever we originally planned this. And so we want to be sensitive to what the communities are desiring and what they want to do at this right now. And so what we were thinking is that we would focus on the mapping approach that we talked about, which is something that we can do remotely for now, and then maybe in early to mid-spring, when hopefully the world's in a little bit better place, then we could think about doing this field work and doing these observational scans. And so we just wanted to hear y'all's thoughts on when you think we could do this or should do this, knowing that the hope is that the community is as involved as possible. So we really want to hear about what would work for you all. So any thoughts or suggestions about kind of the timeline of doing this? And I guess just to clarify, a lot of this would be what this would look like from a very practical point of view is that a person will be walking around with a phone, not necessarily interacting with any person unless they want to chat with a person, a store owner or with a customer or whatever. But it's really about just walking around and taking notes about what you see, whether it's sidewalks that are messed up or whether it's produce that's spoiled in a store, or whether it's the fact there's no fruits and vegetables in the store. That's the type of thing that the person would be doing.
And Jared, if I can maybe even put a finer point on it is, so for example, if somebody were to do that for a convenience store, we know lots of folks shop at convenience stores for their groceries, and we say, it's a convenience store, but this convenience store has fruits and vegetables in it. And this kind of click and grab also takes WIC. That would be something that people would know, we would be able to map, and then the community could say, oh, yeah, this is a place that has fruits and vegetables and fresh produce, and it's in my neighborhood, and they take WIC or they take whatever other supplements, or this is a farmer's market that double your EBT dollar. So that's the kind of things that are helpful to communities to know that you don't know before. I was kind of used to Fort Bragg word, know before you go.
So I just have a quick question. My name is Claudia Perez, and I am with Noonday Kitchen, and we are basically a mobile pantry, and we specialize in disaster relief. So my question is, how are we going to find these people that are going to go around and gather this data? Are the people in this group going to do it, or how are we going to find those people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is something that we have thought about and that we really wanted to hear from you all. I think that you all probably know your community really well, and you know who you think might be good to do this type of work. And so I think we're pretty open to whoever y'all think would be good at this, that we should have involved, whether that's you all as organizations, or whether it's people in the community that you interact with as part of your organizations that you think could really be a good voice for the community, and that you think would do a good job with this. So I think, we had proposed different approaches to this, but I honestly think that's, working with you all as the community organizations and helping to identify people within your organizations or people that you reach, I think that would be a really good way to go about this. But we're open to any suggestions.
And
that's typically how we've done it in the past. Yeah.
And
hi.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So this is Candy Scott. I'm with the Partnership for Children of Cumberland County. And we have a lot of access to families with young children and childcare providers. So I do think I would love to see that families with young children are actually participating in this. And also childcare providers. I mean, children, that's where a good number of our children are getting their healthiest meals, is in childcare facilities. And through our organization, there's even a possibility where we can offer some kind of incentive for people to help out with this. So, I mean, just based on our population, I do think there are ways that our organization can help with this.
Thanks, Candy. I love that. And two things I'll add in, kind of in response to your question and to adding on what Jared said, is one, if you have folks that would be interested, send that information to Gwen, because Gwen and Jared will get together and we can help train to get this started. The second piece is, and Candy, building on your point, the grant also has some funds to help incentivize people to participate, and a focus on the project is about equity. And we know that if people are going to help with the project, we want to compensate them for their time. So, and it won't, it'd be at least be able to say thank you for their time to be able to participate in this. So we do have some funds available to do that. So the action item for you all is, if you have folks that are interested, please send that information to Gwen. Her email is in the chat box, and we'll have it here on the very last slide. And we will set up a training, likely virtually, for them to get started doing this. And Jared and Gwen can help collaborate on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer.
And Jared, did I miss anything there, or did I misspeak? Tell me if I did.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, thank you all for your comments, and also I know there's been some good suggestions in the chat box, so I really appreciate it.
Katie, I'm going to ask a question in response to yours. So the child care centers, you're right. Yes, child care centers, that's where lots of students and kids get their meals. Is there, and I know we have a list of the child care providers through the health department that we would be able to map out to say where. Is there, what kind of other information as it relates to nutrition would be helpful for the child care providers? Is there some context to that we should be looking at?
Well, and I've done some of this work in other counties, and one thing that we did with the child care providers to help supply them with healthy food is connect them to the cooperative extension, to the local farmers, CSA boxes, those kinds of things. So, if we can get information to them about how they can use those resources, I think that would be great.
I'm just thinking out loud here. Is there a list somewhere where by child care provider, which providers offer breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack? Because not every provider does.
Well, actually, we're also the child care resource and referral.
Right.
And so we connect families to child care. And so in order to do that, we have to collect all of this data on the child cares and what they provide. So we probably already have that data as far as, do they serve meals? Is it breakfast and lunch and snack? Those kinds of things. And then, also, I do a provider newsletter, a monthly newsletter, which I can help recruit providers for participation and get information out to them.
Perfect. I think that's a great connection, so that we can link in the child care providers, because you're right, for many of them, and same with our school. I know we have representation from the school district on the line today. Our schools are where lots of kids, especially even now during COVID, are getting their meals from. I'm going to start tagging people into being on our subcommittee. Ashley's reminding me that we have some action items for you guys, and so keep that in mind. We're going to ask for some volunteers in just a minute. Okay, so we're going to keep moving, and link back. Here's your next step, is the food system assessment. So Jared kicked us off and started talking about sort of some of that primary data collection, or collection of data and context that we want to go into this food system assessment that we're going to do. And again, the goal of the food system assessment is to get a really good idea of what's going on in the community, so then we can turn that into a recommendation to the Food Policy Council, so that we can make some sustainable policy change. So that is really important. Really important. So here are the other tasks that we need people to serve on this food system assessment along with Jared, and to get his help to help him. We need to get your secondary data. So all that, Candy, all the stuff that you just mentioned, we'd love to have it.
Great.
If you have other data, we would love for you to be able to share that. And if you need it, to send it to us in a different format or different way, however you'd like for us to share that out. We are flexible, but we're going to work to get a Google Drive posted on the website so people can start data dumping. So and I put a couple of ideas in the chat box: locations of farmers markets, food stands, community gardens, all things that are mappable. But even if it's not mappable, any data that your organization has, how many participants you serve, how many, what population do you serve, what are the demographics that you serve, any data that you have that you're willing to share, we would love to have that from you. And so that it can so we can get a better picture for the food system assessment. So start sending that, or if you have ideas right now, drop them in the chat box. We'd love to have that from you so you can start generating ideas, and that will help trigger thought about what others can provide. Related to that, Fort Bragg is also working on a community needs assessment. Their food community needs assessment is something that they're required to do for their accreditation. It's a little bit delayed because of COVID, but is hopefully taking place either later this fall or early 2021. And if somebody from Fort Bragg is on the line and I misspoke, please correct me. But that survey will have some questions on it related to food insecurity, so we can get a better picture and a better idea of what's going on Fort Bragg related to food insecurity. So that is coming, and we hope that will be completed and ready in time for the food system assessment.
Hey, Dr. Green, it's Colonel Bedno, Cheryl Bedno.
Thank you, Colonel Bedno. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's so right now we're working through some agreements because of our partnership with UNC. So we're hoping early next year that we can get everything in place to roll out that survey.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you. At the same time, the health department and the community every 5 years, we do a community assessment for Cumberland County as well. Again, an accreditation requirement for us. So our health education department is working on this now. It is a comprehensive health assessment. It's actually a regional approach, but we'll have some Cumberland County specific questions. So we are working on that now. Our requirement is for us to also do this in 2021. So the thought is, if we're already collecting data, we don't want to survey the community to death. We will also include questions about food insecurity and food access on that survey. So that is coming and in the works, and we are planning to do that, roll it out again in the springtime. The other task if you are interested in working on the subcommittee, is to do some of these store assessments that Jared talked about. That's a little bit dependent on COVID and what is possible and who can be where and when and what's open and what's closed. But those are also things that we'd like to do to collect some contextual data to go along with the numbers. So again, we'll be able to compensate some people for their time, or at least have a thank you or an incentive for some participation. And then, as Jared noted, we'll put all this together in a report. So what's the timeline for this? Right now, the timeline, as we mentioned, Fort Bragg's assessment is in 2021. Health Department assessment is in the spring. We would like to be able to finish this project, this part of the assessment, by late spring 2021. But we know it's going to be dependent on COVID and what we all can do. And our grant funders know that as well. So the ask of you now is to consider working with Jared on this project. And if you're interested in working and completing this subcommittee, what we'll ask you to do now is to drop your name in the chat box, an email address, and we will collect those from you. We will likely set up at least monthly meetings, virtual, to work with Jared and to just at least touch base about where we are with the food system assessment. So if you are interested in that, please drop your name in the chat box so we can get those meetings going. If you have interest in that, and if you're willing to share data, please drop that information in the chat box as well. I'm going to pause there and see, Jared, what else do you need from folks to get started on that subcommittee?
I don't think anything else. I think that was great. I think that's what the lobby's thing. We're welcome to a range of patients, so we understand that some people will be able to contribute more or less to this. And I think overall, it's not going to be a huge time burden. It's just being proactive about contributing some of these food assessment data sets and that sort of thing. So yeah, I welcome you, and I hope that everyone that's interested, at least to some degree, is willing to jump in and help with this effort.
Perfect. I see some names and we're capturing those in the chat box. So thank you. Again, you don't have to be a data expert. We just need your brain and your experience in the community. If you have, at the same time, we have a lot of organizations represented here. If at the same time, if you have residents who are not necessarily members of organizations that want to participate, we're welcome to have them too. We need their ideas and thoughts and experiences as well. So please have them join in. And someday post-COVID, when we are able to meet in person, we will give you lunch. when we have these meetings, we'll feed you. So if that's also an incentive, but we'll do that post-COVID when we're able to meet in person. The next thing we want to talk about is the Food Policy Council. So we, again, are working to establish this sustainable food policy council that will exist long after the food system assessment is done, long after the grant is over, but we need a subcommittee to help form this food policy council. So this is a subcommittee to form, this is a subcouncil to form a council, essentially. And the work of the subcommittee is going to be to think about the Food Policy Council. What is the purpose of the Food Policy Council? What do you want the goals of the Food Policy Council to be? How, as Gwen mentioned, do you want to structure the Food Policy Council? How they're going to govern themselves? Is that we want it to be a joint collaboration between Cumberland County and Fort Bragg. How will we include the municipalities in that? Is it an appointed board? Is it, which I've seen done lots of times, how many members are on the board? Is it who can appoint? Is it, how do we join the Food Policy Council? All of those things. And there's some best practices that we've learned that we know of, but we need a subcommittee to really nail that down so we can get this piece going. And then in addition, the subcommittee will help to identify, okay, what are the duties and the roles of the subcommittee, of the Food Policy Council? What is their responsibility to the community? And what do we want the Food Policy Council to do? And then to do the hard work of navigating government, including Fort Bragg and Cumberland County, and thinking about how do we formally structure this and set it up to make sure that it is established long-term. And then once that's all done, to start getting members to be a part of that Food Policy Council. So some of you could be on the Food Policy Council, right? And others of you will say, that's not my role. I don't really want to be on the Food Policy Council, but I just want to be engaged. But thinking about how do we get people to be on the Food Policy Council, and is there an application process? Is it appointed? What does that look like? But the Food Policy Council Formation Subcommittee, we'll come up with a better name, is going to do that hard work to make sure that we have something in place that doesn't just fall apart after a year, or is just sort of a committee that meets occasionally. So that's the role of the subcommittee for the Food Policy Council. And the timeline for that is, one, to develop a subcommittee. That's the first step. We're doing that now. The second step is really by February, we want to start working on those goals and purpose of the Food Policy Council. By March, we want to think about what are the membership duties, responsibilities. By April, we really want to get the structure in place and help kind of generate the formality of it all, of getting it actually formed and signed off on. And then really by July, to getting members and getting the council up and running. So that's a rough timeline. We know COVID will impact this. Every time we make a plan, COVID derails it, but that's the general idea of where we'd like to go. Again, we have support from many folks in the community that have done this before to learn. So this is the ask. You are interested in being on that subcommittee, drop your name in the chat box with your email. I have Claudia, Candy, and Captain Thornton for the Food System Assessment Subcommittee. We will now if you will drop your name in the chat box if you're interested in being on the Food Policy Council Formation Subcommittee. Again, anticipating monthly meetings with maybe a little bit of homework in between. Although meetings will be virtual at some point. When we meet in person, we'll feed you. And then you guys, the subcommittee can work to have dates and times that are workable for that group. So either drop your name in the chat box. Thank you. I see you, Captain Thornton, on both committees. Sherry Kearney, thank you. Ms. Hammonds, can you, if you have contact information for Sherry, will you drop that in there too, please? Or you can email it to Gwen. So drop your information there, and we will, we are going to start those meetings very soon. And I'll give you the next steps in just a moment. So I'm going to pause and get your reaction to that and see what questions you have about forming the Food Policy Council. Candy on both, thank you. What questions, comments, or thoughts do you guys have about that?
This is Lindsay with the Community Food Strategies team. I'm curious if you all have talked about a policy on policy, especially because it seems like there will be county employees involved with your policy work. So just something to keep in mind, and I can definitely help connect you with some resources around that if that's something you want to do.
So Lindsay, can you say more about that? Are you thinking, yeah, for a lot of us, we either work for city government or federal government or county government, and how do you, the work of the Food Policy Council is sometimes political, and how do you do that as a county or city or federal employee? Is that what your thought is?
Exactly. Yes. Basically, just some plans for how you would navigate that. And if there was a situation to come up where there were some questions around government employees' involvement in a food policy council activity, then you would have a document to refer to that all of the interested parties have agreed to in the past.
Yes, so I think that's a great point. I've seen, yes, I can think of a few situations where I've seen that come up across, especially if the Food Policy Council, for example, is advocating for a particular policy. Then as a county employee or a government employee, you may not be able to individually advocate for something, but the Food Policy Council as a whole could, even if you as an individual cannot do that. So yeah, I think sometimes the line gets a little bit gray there. So that's a great thought. And if you have a resource, we'd love to have it, or a template or something others have done. I would love to see that.
Great. I'll connect with our main policy person on our team.
Other thoughts about Food Policy Council? What are your initial thoughts about sort of structure? Lindsay or Jared, can you chime in and just briefly talk about what other structures you've seen in place in terms of food policy councils and what you've seen other communities, how they've set it up? And this will be, again, to our knowledge, will be the first one that's joint with a military base, so it'll be a little bit different. But can you, either one of you, talk about what you've seen, how others have set it up?
Yeah. So yeah, we'll probably actually be learning from you in some ways with this. The military component to this, which is cool because we haven't seen that. As Gwen mentioned earlier, would love for you all to get in contact with McDowell County because they do have a similar formal structure that you all are proposing that involves local government Orange County actually, they have a paid coordinator, which isn't always the case with food councils. Sometimes they're more grassroots and volunteer led, and may not have a strong local government component. But Orange County's coordinator is currently funded through the different, I believe there's 3 municipalities in Orange County, and each of them contributed to form one full-time position to help coordinate the food council there. So that's really helped with their capacity. Not that we don't have other councils that, you know, are doing great work, but definitely having that staff member can really help increase capacity, because that person can serve as a central point to bring people together, share information across the different committees and the food council, and just really help coordinate efforts and be a good consistent voice in that case to local government. It really varies, honestly. Like I said, we do have some more informal structures that we see. The Wake County one is a very flat organization. I'm actually a member of that one myself, and we have what are called circles, and we do have a coordinating circle that meets to kind of coordinate between all the topic-based circles, but we don't have a staff member. We do have an AmeriCorps member, but it's pretty flat, and mostly folks who work for local government and nonprofit, and we're trying to increase the number of actual community members with lived experience rather than folks who work with them on our council. And then another structure I've seen is some of the youth councils that we have are actually tied to local nonprofits and kind of grow out of their initiatives. So as you can imagine, as diverse as our counties are, that's as diverse as food councils can be sometimes. And then I love that you all are just going for it with Food Policy Council, because that's something else that's kind of changed over the years. How comfortable councils are engaging with policy and kind of what that looks like in each county has shifted over the years.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, I would just,
Jared.
yeah, I'll just 100% agree with what Lindsay said based on my experience. Yeah, I think that having people that have a little skin in the game in terms of like expectations, I think really helps push forward works within the council. I think if it's all volunteer, it can be done successfully, but I think that it just takes a certain level of engagement that can be hard to find sometimes. And I completely echoed the need to get more community members involved, so there's just not organizations that are driving all the actions. So yeah, everything she said, I completely back up.
Thank you both. I agree. I've seen the same thing, where when you have at least a person that's paid the least part of the time, then that's helpful. And then sometimes if you have some agency that can help go after grants, it helps to sustain it. And you can at least pay somebody either through government, or you can pay somebody through a nonprofit to lead it, so it doesn't fall through the cracks and everybody has grand ideas, but we can't get done because we don't have a funding source. Or and then there's also some, just thinking big picture going forward, there are some opportunities once you get established for food policy councils to apply for grants specifically to do policy work, so that we're not just beating our heads against the wall, we're changing policy along with it along the way. So I'm going to give you guys some final next steps, and then we will wrap up for the day. So our next meeting is going to be on December the 17th at noon at the same time. If you are interested in being on a subcommittee and you have not put your information on the chat box, or you know somebody that isn't here with us today but would be interested in serving on a subcommittee, especially if they're a resident, we love you all that you are the organizations, but if you also know residents that would be that maybe aren't affiliated with a particular organization that want to be on a subcommittee. We'd love to have their participation as well. And in this group too. So our next big group meeting will be on December the 17th. We'll send out a GoToMeeting link. In addition, we are going to kick off our monthly subcommittee meetings. So those subcommittee meetings will meet beginning either December or January. And then we will, once that is done, we will likely move to quarterly meetings for this larger. So we're not we're not having so many meetings every month. And this large group will be able to check in. But the subcommittees will meet monthly. So that's the plan going forward. So I'm going to do a little action items here. Oh, sorry. Thank you. I missed an L on the email. So Gwen's email has 2 L's, not 1. And I'm going to give you your action items again before we finish up. Your first action item is if you have data to share, whatever it is, whether it's in a map or on paper, in whatever format, something that's interesting to share about your organization that we can put in a food system assessment to get a better picture. That's your first action item. Send that to Gwen. And then we will also work on getting a Google Drive set up so you can also share it there. Your second action item is if you are interested in being on a subcommittee and you have not put your name in the chat box, please email Gwen with 2 L's and put that in the, please email Gwen and we will reach back out to you. Your third action item is to invite somebody next time to be in the, to come to this meeting or to be on the subcommittee. Bring a friend with you. And then your fourth action item, if you need more homework, is if you have residents or agencies that are interested in participating in doing some food, doing the mapping project with Jared, and going out and collecting some data, please also email Gwen as well. So those are your action items. Any questions before we wrap for the day? Okay, go forth and dream about your post-pandemic activities. I loved seeing those. I hope you all have a wonderful day today. Thank you for all for being here.